and welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing my 2022 books in review video where basically I give you statistics and I give you my final opinions on all the books that I read in 2022. 2022 I can describe as a transitional year. It is a year where I didn't read that many books considering. I read 31 books, which compared to last year's 40. Well, I almost reached 45, I think, last year. But the past few years I've been hitting above 40, and this year I only read 31. But it was a transitional year because coming into this year, I knew that I was going to read fewer books. And that is because this was the year that I decided that I was going to make a full-on effort to read novels in Japanese. I live in Japan, I speak Japanese, but I've gotten very lazy with my Japanese reading, at least when it comes to novels. I do read a lot of manga in Japanese, but just I've gotten lazy with books. So 2021, I had only read one Japanese language book the entire year, and that was the very, very last month of the year. That was December, where I was like, oh my goodness, I have to read in Japanese. And so this year, thanks to the creation of my book club, where myself and two other members, we decided to read one Japanese language book per month to make ourselves read. Although one of those members is Japanese, he just wanted to participate and have fun with me and my American friend as we read these books. But yeah, thanks to that effort, this year I read a lot more Japanese books. But also thanks to that effort, because I wanted to keep that momentum and I wanted to keep that energy and that spirit, and that motivation to read Japanese, it definitely slowed me down in other languages. So I read a lot less in English and I read a lot less in French, which means that I read less overall. So a success for my reading year, but not so much a success. So a success for my Japanese language reading, but not so much success for my general reading. And I am filming on the new iPhone 14, and I feel like I look like a bobblehead today. Do I? Maybe it's the angle of the camera. I don't know. I feel like maybe it's the shirt I'm wearing. does it look like I have a big head today? It kind of feels that way when I look in the camera. I don't. I feel strange. I feel really weird. So before I officially start though, I wanted to give you a brief overview of what I read in December, because I only read one novel in December, so I'm not gonna have a December wrap up. So I'm just gonna tell you, I finished, and this is actually our November pick for our December book club. This is Hanataba wa Doku, A Bouquet is Poison. It's just a standard mystery, nothing fancy. It was fun, it was very predictable. I figured out who it was, which isn't, a plot, which isn't like a point against the book, because actually this is a mystery book that actually does give you all the information. You are supposed to be able to figure it out yourself, and I did. But the thing is, like, the actual story itself, the way it was written, just didn't really keep me that enticed. So finished the November book club pick for in the month of December, and then we abandoned the December book club pick because it was too difficult in level. And then December, I just ended up reading the very 7 volumes of Detective Conan in the French version, which brings me up to date with the French translation. So that's all I read in December. So there's my December wrap up. Let's move on to the 2022 wrap up. So once again, I read 31 books in 2022. And since we're on the topic of language, let's break those down. So I ended up reading 11 books in Japanese, which is amazing. I've never done this before. The most I've read in a year is like 4 books, I think. So I read 11 books in Japanese thanks to my book club, and I'm hoping to kill it again this year in 2023. We have decided to continue the book club, and I'm super excited, and I really want to see how we do this year. So 11 books in Japanese, super, super excited about that. That's really, really amazing. Like, I can't tell you how over the moon I am about that. And then I ended up reading 9 books in French. So some books are missing because I read a few in Texas and didn't bring those with me since there's no point. I ended up reading but 9 books in French. This is an very old copy of Le Père Goriot by Balzac that's kind of losing its spine. I need to find a way to glue that back together. But I did read 9 books in my native language of French. And then I read 11 books in my other native language of English. So those are all the books. That's my language breakdown. I ended up reading only 3 nonfiction books this year compared to the 28 books of fiction I read. I definitely want to read more nonfiction in 2023 just because I love nonfiction and I have some good ones on my pile. But I read a memoir about the Empress Dowager Cixi. Is that how you pronounce it? Which is fantastic. I read John Krakauer, he wrote Into Thin Air about the horrible disaster in Mount Everest. I read another book of his, Under the Banner of Heaven. Don't like that one as much as the Everest story, but still very good. Basically, this book about Mormonism, the part about Mormonism and the creation of Mormonism was fabulous. But the true crime element of the book, I didn't feel as strong. I understood that it served as an anchor to bring out the story about Mormonism, but because the book is advertised more on the true crime side, I thought that was actually kind of the weaker part. And then I read Cult of Glory, The Bold and Brutal History of the Texas Rangers by Doug J. Swanson. I'm from Texas. I'm from Austin, Texas. And so when I went to the Alamo this past May, because I hadn't been to the Alamo in years and kind of wanted to revisit, I saw this in the bookshop and ended up buying it and ended up really enjoying it. It was really, really super interesting. So those are the 3 nonfiction I read. In terms of male-female breakdown, this is not something that's super important to me because naturally I've always read both quite without really any effort. And it ended up being pretty much a 50-50 breakdown. I read 15 female authors and I read 16 male authors, where Jules Verne and Balzac I read twice. I read 2 books of theirs this year. And then interesting in that, although aided by the fact that we did this book club, I read 17 new to me authors. So I read 17 books by authors I've never read before, and then I read 12 books by authors I've already read from. Where once again, Jules Verne and Balzac, I read 2 books by them. So what does this give me in terms of page count? I read about 7,707 pages this past year. That leads to about 21 pages a day. So pretty small when you consider the fact that usually I tend to read like 60 to 80 pages a day, to be honest. But the thing is that I'll take very long breaks. I'll take a week break, or like I'll read 60, 80, 100 pages in one day for like a week, and then I don't read anything for 3 weeks. So I'm very inconsistent with my reading. So while I am able to read in long spurts, I don't tend to do that for a long time span. So the average over 365 days ends up to be a pretty low 21 days. So that's 21 pages. So it's not exactly reflective of my style of reading, but it does show that with just 20 pages per day, though, that you can actually read quite a lot of books, especially when you consider that I read a lot of these in Japanese, my slowest language to read in. So I think, that still says something, and I still think that's a very significant number. So 21 pages per day. The longest book, considering when we take into page account, the longest book I read this year was East of Eden by John Steinbeck, which stands at 602 pages. That's for the fiction. And then when it comes to nonfiction, the longest book that I read was the Empress Dowager Cixi, coming in at 436 pages. Much shorter than her biography of Mao, which I read last year, which is also incredibly fantastic. So good. Highly recommended, but much shorter than the Mao book. Then, on On the other side of things, and these books I don't have with me because I read them back in Texas when I read a bunch of novellas. The shortest book I read was Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. That is only 95 pages. I read that book for the very first time in my life. Funny, interestingly enough, surprisingly enough, I'd never read that before. And I read it for the first time in my life, and just a nice little short day of reading. So 95 pages for that. I also read Balzac's Le Colonel Chabert, which I absolutely adored. I really, really loved that little story. That was only 99 pages. So I read 2 books under 100 pages, and I really enjoyed both of them. So I definitely am a big fan of short novels. Basically, I'm a fan of any page count. It doesn't really matter. I like the long books that you can like stay with for like a few weeks, and just really just immerse yourself, and you're in it for a long time, and you're just, oh, I absolutely love those for sure. But I also like the quick books you can read in a day, or the books you can read in a weekend. I love it all. Like there's something good in every single page length. So very exciting for that. Other than that, yeah, the books that I read had a pretty much basically most likely because of all these like short contemporary Japanese fiction. Japanese books are actually quite short, to be honest. If I were at the native level, like I can tell I could read these in a day easily. They're very simple to read. The font is quite large in these. So if I got my reading speed up, these would actually be really easy to read in a day, because yeah, contemporary novels are actually quite short. So because of that, most of the books fall in this short like 200 to 300 page range, and only 2 other fiction books other than The East of Eden, only 2 other fiction books actually fell over 300 pages. One was Juste après la vague by Sandrine Colette, which is a French book, Just After the Wave. It has been translated into English, but this is at 343 pages. And then Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier was 441 pages. So again, because my year was dominated by the Japanese reading, my page count is low, my reading pace is low, everything is low. But it's a transitional year. Sometimes you need a transitional year to help build and strengthen your next years to come. So I'm definitely not sad about my reading year. Definitely still very proud of what I've done. Okay, so let's look at publication dates. The oldest book that I read was Le Père Goriot. Nope, it's Le Colonel Chabert, same author, but Le Colonel Chabert, the short 99 page book by Honoré de Balzac. That was published in 1832. This Le Père Goriot was published just a few years after, but still on my old range. This is not an original book from that year, by the way. It's just an older, it's not even that old, I think. I think this is only like when was this published? It's not even that old a copy. It's just, it didn't, 1931. So like 1930s basically is when this came out. So not even that old. It's just like, probably wasn't stored very well. But yeah, not that old of a copy. But yeah, the book was published around the 1830s. The newest books that I read were obviously the Japanese ones. Obvious because it's reading contemporary works. It's a lot easier, which is what my book club needs. We need, lower reading level for the books to adjust for all the members. But yeah, the newest ones were Omokage, so Mother's Silhouette, which was published in 2021. This was a nominee for the famous Akutagawa Prize in Japan that I absolutely love. I love that prize. I follow it. And this is the first time I win a nominee instead of just the winner. So really enjoyed this one. This was fun. And then the last book I introduced, Hanataba wa Doku, Bouquet and Venom, or Bouquet is Venom, was also published in 2021. So very cool to be up to date with contemporary books, so I can talk with people and be, in the loop for what's being published in Japan. It's like pretty exciting. Like, I think that's really cool. In terms of how I'm doing with clearing my TBR, so it's very important for me not even so much to clear my TBR, but if I am going to buy new books, I want it to be because I'm super excited about them, and then I want to read them right away. So if I'm buying new books, it should be because I have the intention of reading them at the moment, like within the week that I buy them. There's I don't want to do the whole saving a book for a rainy day, because that's just there's really no point in that. I mean, make today it actually is quite gloomy outside, but make today the rainy day and read the book that you want to read right now. So it's very important for me to definitely be not only, yes, clear out some of the older titles that have been on my bookshelves the most, but also clear out the titles that I'm buying right now, because like, what's the point of me buying them if I don't read them? So in terms of clearing my TBR, I read 10 books that I purchased in 2022. I will tell you later how many I acquired in 2022, which just makes it a little different story. But I did read 10 books that I acquired in 2022. I was able to read 11 books that I acquired in 2021. So again, making sure I am clearing those books out. I read 2 books that were purchased in 2020, 3 from 2019, 1 from 2012, 2011, and 2010. And then I read 2 books from 2008. So 2008 one, that's really very, very happy that I've been able to clear books that are now 15 years old. I think that's really, really good progress. Did I do that math right? 7 years old. No, 15 years old, 15 years old. Yeah. So it's good. It's good. I'm going through my pile and whatnot. Unfortunately, though, I bought a lot more books in 2022 than I thought I had. It's really weird. I really had no memory of acquiring so many books, which is 58. I actually acquired 58 books. So I kind of looked at where it was that I bought so many, because like, it's not like I was going to the bookstore. I didn't order any books online or anything like that. So I was really confused. And then I remembered, okay, so at the beginning of the year, I immediately I purchased 6 books by Aki Shimazaki, which are these right here. They're very short, and there's basically 5 in a series. So I bought them because then I completed one series, and then I bought an entire new series because of that. So these are very short, so I'm okay. So for me, my thought process was it's okay to buy 6 at once because these are very short and they're supposed to be read back to back. So like, yeah, it's 5 books that are about 150 pages, but you kind of read them right away, all of them. So that gives you like a 500-page book. The font's a little not that small, so yeah, about like a 500 normal page book. So that seems very reasonable. So I'm okay with that purchase, and those will definitely be something that I probably read this year. Then I bought one secret book for my TBR that I ended up not introducing this year, or in 2022. I will be introducing it hopefully this year in 2023, but that one has 4 tomes just by itself. So you will hopefully see that this year, but still not introducing it. But I did buy that at once. So 1 book, but there's 4 volumes. Then I have my Japanese language books, where I bought 15. So this one's not so good because the thing is, like, I live in Japan. I shouldn't need to like stockpile Japanese language books. There's no point, because when I need it, I can just buy it at that moment. So that's not really good. But I did read 7 out of the 15. And then I actually we abandoned the December pick. So like 8 out of the 15 that I bought, I immediately read or processed them, which is good. That means I'm not being too ridiculous with that kind of buying. Because like I said, I live here. I don't need to stockpile the books, because I can just walk 3 minutes and buy the book if I need it right away. And most of those books were purchased for the book club. So I feel okay with that. Then there's my US book haul. When I went back to the US, I organized all my books. I unhauled a lot of books. I reorganized, put all my the books that I left behind, I put them all in one pile so that I have easier access with them. And then basically I just organized my shelves. And I ended up bringing back 14 books from the US. But here's the thing. So I acquired 58 books in 2022, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I purchased 58 books in 2022. When it comes to the US book haul, I hauled 14 books, but 10 of them were books that I already owned. So that's really good. I didn't do any purchasing. And so I already owed them, and then I read them immediately. I just didn't bring them back to the US. And so basically when I was back in the US, I only actually really purchased 4. So that's not bad. I only really purchased 4, and I've read 1 out of those 4 that I can recall right now. I don't remember the other 3 are off the top of my head, other than the Japanese book, which is on my TBR. Now, I think that the biggest one was the French book haul. When I went back to France this past November, that's where I actually bought a lot of books. I bought 16 books. 1 book has 2 volumes in it, but 16 volumes I purchased of books. But I'm still okay with that because the majority of those were Jules Verne books. I am collecting all of the Jules Verne adventure stories, all the adventure books, and I read those quite regularly. And so I'm okay with adding to my collection because those books will definitely get read. So while it was a large book haul, it makes sense with my reading. It's not something where like the books will stay on my TBR pile and never get read. These are books that are actually will get read. At least the ones that are more contemporary, I'll read them immediately, and then the ones that are part of my collection will get read eventually because I am enjoying my process of going through those. So acquired a lot more books than I thought, but I'm okay. I'm okay with that. Like actually, when I actually go through the process behind it all, it's not that bad. And then when you look at, I had actually acquired 62 books in 2021, which is also quite surprising. But out of the books that I purchased in 2021, there are only 26 left that I haven't read. So I've actually read a good majority of those. It seems like I read like a third. When I buy books, I read like a third of them in that year I purchased them. The next year I'll read another third, and by the end I've read like another pretty much a third. So I think I'm okay with that. And this year I don't really plan on buying books that much to begin with, so I think it'll be even better. I will be clearing a lot of books off my shelves this year, so I'm okay with that. So where does my TBR stand for the beginning of 2023? I have 3 books in Spanish, 37 books in Japanese, 61 books in French, and 43 books in English, leading for a total physical TBR of 144 books. So we'll see where I get to this year. I'm very excited. So 140 books. If I can read 44 books this year and get to a TBR of 100, that'll be great. I don't think it'll happen to get to 100 because, again, my Japanese book club, I will have to buy books for that. But if I can get close to 100, I'll be happy with that. I'll be very excited. Oh, I totally said that wrong. That was my TBR at the beginning of 2022. The TBR at the end of 2022, which means the TBR starting off 2023, is actually higher. It's a total of 170. I have 3 books in Spanish, 39 books in Japanese, 78 books in French. You see, it's for the French books that really got me. And then 50 books in English. So yeah, a total of 170. I'm not going to get it to 100 this year. It's just not going to happen. But that's okay. Like, I still feel good about it. All right. Let's do publication date really quickly. I actually, again, because I shouldn't say I'm surprised, but yeah, because of the Japanese book club, I read a lot of contemporary works. I read 20 books that were published between 2000 and 2021. I read 6 books from 1950 to 2000, 2 books from the 1900 to 1950, 1 book 1850 to 1900, 3 books from the 1800s to 1850, and then I read no books from pre-1800s. So actually quite a lot of contemporary stuff because of the book club, so that's fun. All right, countries, which this year's includes the nonfiction, because this year the nonfiction had people, US people writing about US, Chinese people writing about China. So I was able to include in the stats which countries I read from. Obviously, I read 14 books from Japan. Because of that book club, that's going to be the majority, of course. I read 5 books from the US, 6 books from France, 2 books from England, 1 from South Korea, Italy, China, and Belgium. China, I'm kind of sad because it's just that one nonfiction book. I didn't read any literature this year from China. That's definitely something that I was hoping to be reading more Chinese literature, because I've fallen in love with Chinese literature. So hopefully 2023, I'll finally be doing that, because yeah, definitely having fun with the Chinese literature. All right, I am finished with statistics, so I'm going to tell you my favorite book of the year. I have to tell you right now, I didn't really have too many new absolutely favorite books. It was very much, again, transitional year, experimenting, seeing what I like, trying to build a reading rhythm and whatnot. So nothing too exciting, but my favorite book was definitely East of Eden by John Steinbeck. This book took me by surprise. I absolutely couldn't put it down. I really loved it. So yeah, East of Eden was my favorite book by this year. Just absolutely loved it. In terms of worst, like the book I hated the most, for me, that's really obvious. Like I could not stop talking about how much I hated this book. And that it was painful to read. I only continued to read it because it was part of the book club and I didn't want it to abandon it. And that was Yoru no Bakemono by Sumino Yoru. This book is translated to At Night I Am a Monster. And this was the most obvious, annoying, oh my goodness, shoot me in the head, I hate all the characters kind of book I've read in a long time. I absolutely hated this. I never want to see this book again. I could not stand it. I just really absolutely hated this. Like vehemently hate this book. Really just hate it. Hate it. Hate it. Yeah, absolutely just can't stand it. Could not stand that book. Then favorite nonfiction, not really anything. I loved all 3 books that I read. Cult of Glory, I think, was the most surprising for me as to how much I liked it. It was just super interesting, like really just very eye-opening, and gave me a rich look at the history of the Texas, but as well as US, which was really fascinating. I really loved Under the Banner of Heaven. I learned so much about Mormonism. I thought this was fascinating. I'm very much someone who is incredibly anti-organized religion, and to be able to see basically the creation of a new religion in like under modern eyes, and like we have all the data and people still believe in it, like, and yeah, for me this was absolutely fascinating. Loved it. And then Empress Dowager, I would say weaker than the Mao in terms of interest, but I still absolutely loved this book. I thought she was super interesting character. Definitely a woman you should read about. And yeah, really loved this book. So yeah, all the nonfiction were hits. Definitely enjoyed everything I read about that. Loved reading Jules Verne again, you know, continuing to read Jules Verne. I just absolutely love it. Can't go over it. I enjoyed Rebecca. I enjoyed The Chrysalids. I was very disappointed in The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. I really wanted this to be a really successful reading experience, because the plot, the idea of this alternative history where the US, well, not the US, but where, yeah, US lost the war and like US is occupied by Nazi Germany and Japan. I thought that idea was fascinating. But the execution, I didn't care too much for it. But yeah, I just, you know, in general, enjoyed my reading year. I would say my favorite book cover visually this year is Hanataba wa Doku. I think this book cover is absolutely striking. I think it's very beautiful. However, I also think it has nothing to do with the book. So while striking, it serves no purpose. But it did help me well, us, it did help us pick the book because we were absolutely enamored by the book cover. But yeah, beautiful book cover, really has nothing to do with the story. I don't really have any super ugly book covers. I think Silence, this isn't really super exciting. Although using the character in the background to represent the cross, I mean, I think that's creative, but stylistically not super exciting. But other than that, I mean, most of the books were just fairly generic. Just to get a look at some Japanese book covers. This one was quite nice. I like this one, although, you know, it's a foreign woman on the cover and there's no foreign women in this book, so it has nothing to do with the book cover. This one is very on point. This one is like, it's more like children's lit, so this works. But, you know, just like super standard. I do tend to like Japanese book covers quite a bit. But yeah, everything was kind of just like, you know, visually, in terms of visual styling, everything was kind of like on the mediocre side. Nothing too exciting. And yeah, that's it for my basically reading. I also read, other than that, I read manga this year, a lot of it. Let me just give you a brief overview of that, but I will be going over these in more detail in another video. But I read a few volumes of Ranma. I read the entire series of Marmalade Boy. I read the entire series of Boku Dake ga Inai Machi, which is translated as Erased in English. I am up to date with Gokushufudo. This is the way of the house husband. I love the series, but yeah, I'm up to date with that one. I started a brand new series. This is the debut. 2 books on volume 2 came out last year as well, and I've already purchased it. But that is Kujima Utaeba Ie Horo Horo. So absolutely love this. Not translated in English, but it should be. It's absolutely so deliciously quaint and funny and just charming. Then I read basically the first arc of Saint Seiya, which is very exciting. I read this volume of a new manga called 5080. I was hoping it would be more than it is. I don't see it getting a second volume. I don't think it became that very popular. We'll see, but I think I'm not going to continue, even if it does. I read the last volume that came out about Orange, so that was really fun. I read the entire of the soccer manga Shoot. I also read this single volume of Quartet Game by the same mangaka as Marmalade Boy. Then I absolutely fell in love with the new artist Pampanya, and I read Pampanya's charming little short story manga collection, Nippiki no Kingyo. I forgot one to read. Nippiki me no Kingyo. So the second goldfish. And this is absolutely stunning, absolutely beautiful. So happy I found that. I read that. I read the duology Takopi no Genzai, Takopi's Original Sin. This was fantastic, amazing. And then I ended the year reading a few volumes of Under Ninja. And then, as I mentioned earlier, my computer is on it, but let me grab it. I read I caught up to Detective Conan in the original French, not the original, in the translated French version. So yeah, that brings my manga TBR at 465 for the year, which is a lot, but that's how it is. Anyway, that's it for today. For all my manga 2022, not manga, all the books and manga read in 2022. So interesting year. I did really well with manga. I did really well with reading Japanese books. 2023 though, I do want to increase the English and French books. I have so much on my TBR that I'm just excited to read, and I want to get to those no matter what. So yeah, this year will be about finding the balance between wanting to improve my Japanese, but also not forgetting all the other books that I want to read. So in any case, thank you so much for watching, especially if this is your first time. Maybe this is your introduction to my channel, to my reading. Yeah, this is where you'll get a nice mix of every language. Anyway, again, thank you so much for watching me in 2022, and I hope to see you in 2023. I hope we all have an excellent reading year. All right, see you in my next video. Bye.